You and I have we are complex entities. I don't mean just biochemically or psychologically or anatomically. We are complex entities in the fact that a part of us is separate from everything else, and part of us is not separate from everything else. That is, we are both a group of separate entities, and we are an awareness that is manifested as many entities, but it is only one. In other words, there is a real unity, not just a theoretical thing or a delightful New Age thing to talk about. There is indeed a unity of awareness that exists, and those of you that have practiced the disciplines to extricate your mind from identification with your own separateness, with the thoughts of your own separateness, the thoughts of who you think you are, have experienced, in fact, the shared awareness that comes when you get outside of your own separateness. And it is as if we come out of one and we return to one, and during the course of our incarnation or our life on earth, we are busy being separate. Now, the interesting question is not whether or not the journey involves the separateness of your body. It's where your mind or awareness is or intuitive heart is in relation to that separateness. And what I mean by feeding is, and this goes back, if you would like a metaphor to hang on to, it is one of the metaphors that's familiar, though you may not want to adopt it as your own, is the metaphor of the Garden of Eden, of the eating of the apple, of separateness, in which how you can interpret the apple. One way is eating of self-consciousness, or eating of something which gives one the awareness, the ability to think about things, the identification with one's thinking mind, the way in which one begins to see the universe in the world of objects rather than merely being like a tree or a rock, a part of it all. And it is at that point where Adam and Eve hide themselves with fig leaves, and God sees this process and realizes that they have eaten of the apple because now they have shame or self-consciousness or whatever neurotic patterns they're beginning to develop at that point. And he says, whoever told you you were naked? In other words, how did you figure out that you were somebody so that you started to be embarrassed? And that begins a journey of separateness, of going out of the Garden of Eden or going out of the oneness. And one could interpret life as an awakening journey back to unity. Not to unity as opposed to diversity, but to the unity where unity and diversity are each contained in the other. That is, we got lost into diversity because everybody around us trained us to be somebody and to think we were somebody, because our parents certainly knew who they thought they were, and they know who they thought we were, and they trained us to think we were who they thought we were, and we bought it, and so we are who we think we are. But we really aren't, and that's the hype of it, you see. And that's what the journey of awakening is about, is to realize that we've been had by our own evolution, in a sense, and the evolution offers us the opportunity to awaken out of that process. So the predicament we have is that as separate entities, and then what is the topmost instrument in us that preserves our separateness? Well, it's obviously our intellect, which is defined to preserve the separate entity for security, for survival, and it's constantly watching out to protect and to interpret and to analyze and to create a safe haven for the separate entity. But there is another component in us which, to identify these as head and heart, is naive and simplistic, but because there's no physiological locus, there's no anatomical locus, but I'll do it anyway, to say that the alternative mechanism that is going on simultaneously is something which we have come familiarly to call often the intuitive heart. And it is a way of being in the universe without being in it as object. That is, because the thinking mind always takes an object. It always thinks about something. So as long as you identify with your thinking mind, you are always in the world of objects. That means you're always in dualism, means you are always separate from the rest of the universe. As long as you are separate from the rest of the universe, you are hungry. Comes down, that's the way to say it. And that as you extricate yourself, not from your body, but from your identification with your body, not from your thoughts, but from your identification with your thoughts, you begin to be receptive to an intuitive, heartful way of being in the universe, or being in harmony with things, or being intuitively connected, or knowing more than you know, as Black Elk talks about it, or the Ogallala Sioux, of somehow being connected to the universe in a way that it is subjective. It's from inside rather than from outside. And that experience and that channel feeds us. That channel is like when you see planes refueling in midair with that tube. That's what it looks like. And when that intuitive quality is happening in the universe, when you are tuned to that which is around you and are not caught in your own separateness, you end up being fed. And so then you look and you at your acts and you say, are my acts feeding me or aren't they? And now we understand what that term means. Are my acts in relation to other people and the work I do increasing my separateness or reducing my separateness from other beings? I can say hello to you in two ways. I can say hello to you in a way that keeps you separate, and I can say hello to you in a way that brings us together. And there is no phenotypical difference. There's no superficial difference in those two things. But there is a basic difference in where I am in relation to my act.